Could you forgive someone who took from you what was pure and innocent? And what if justice turned its face away, letting the guilty walk the same streets where your pain began? Today, you'll hear the story of a man who lost everything, and when he searched for peace, he found only condemnation. Before you judge, take a deep breath and tell me in the comments, what would you have done in his place?
My name is Thomas Hale. I'm 63 years old, and this is the last sound my voice will ever make. I was born and raised in Charleston, South Carolina, where the wind from the Atlantic carries both salt and sorrow. I worked as a carpenter for over 30 years, building tables, cribs, coffins, and now I wait to die sitting on a chair made of wood. Today is September 22nd, 1977, and in just a few hours, they'll turn on the lights of this room and erase me from this world. But before that happens, I need to tell you what really happened that day. Because for years, people only heard what they were told about me, not what I actually lived. It all began more than a decade ago, when I still had a reason to smile. My daughter, Clara, was the kind of child who could light up even the darkest days. After my wife died of cancer, she became the reason I kept breathing. But one morning in April of 1961, that light went out. Clara left home wearing the blue dress she helped me sew. She said she was going straight to school, and she never came back. For 3 days, I walked barefoot through the streets, calling her name like a man drowning and reaching for air. And when her body was found by the Ashley River, something inside me stopped beating too. The police arrested a man named Royce Maddox, a former mechanic known for trouble and drink. Everyone in town knew what he'd done, but the evidence vanished. The witnesses went silent, and soon he was free, laughing on the same streets where my little girl once played. That day, something broke inside me. Time didn't heal. Faith didn't answer. And justice looked away. So before they turn off this tape and my voice becomes just an echo, I want to tell you, in every detail, what really happened that night. Not to justify what I did, but so someone, somewhere, might understand that sometimes what they call a crime is only the desperation of a heart that's already dead inside. You think you understand right and wrong, but you only truly do when you lose everything you love. That was the day my trial began. Not in court, but before God and before my own conscience. I don't want pity. I just want you to listen all the way to the end. Because the truth, the one no one wanted to hear, begins now. Today is my last day on earth. For weeks, I knew this moment would come. But the truth is, no one is ever ready to see the sun for the last time. The cell is quiet, and every second feels heavier than the one before. I hear footsteps in the hallway, distant echoes from a world that no longer belongs to me. Time has become something different in here. Sometimes it rushes, sometimes it stops, and today it feels cruelly calm. They say the body knows when it's about to die. Maybe that's true. Since sunrise, I've felt a strange coldness in my hands and a peace that frightens me. Not because I want to live, but because I've realized that death itself isn't what hurts the most. What truly destroys a man is what comes before it. The regret, the memories, everything that could have been different. I've spent so many years in this corridor of damp walls and empty prayers that I've learned to talk to silence. In here, silence is the only thing that never lies. People say I found God. The truth is, I'm still not sure if he found me. Sometimes I speak to him, unsure if it's faith or despair. Today, as I record these words, I asked for only one thing, that wherever Clara is, she knows her father never forgot. I thought I would feel anger, but I don't. What I feel is longing, a kind that burns quietly, a longing that doesn't ask for forgiveness or justice, only presence. I remember her face every night. Sometimes I dream of her laughter, and I wake with tears I no longer have the strength to wipe away. This last day doesn't taste like an ending. It tastes like waiting, waiting for something that may never come. They brought me the usual dinner, but I didn't touch it. Here, the food tastes like dust, and even the water feels tired. In the hallway, the guards avoid meeting my eyes, maybe because they see in them what everyone fears. The truth that any one of us, pushed far enough by pain, can cross the line that separates a man from a monster. I'm not a saint, but I'm not what they say I am either. Today, as I record this tape, I realize that life is nothing more than the sum of our choices. And I made mine long ago, driven by something that neither justice nor time could ever erase, the love for my daughter. And that's why, before they turn off the light in this cell, I want to make it clear. This day, my last day, is not the end of my story. It's the moment it finally gets to be heard. I was born in 1914 on a small farm near Charleston. My father was a fisherman, and my mother sewed clothes for the wealthier families in town. I grew up surrounded by the smell of the sea, wet wood, and mud after the rain. We never had much, but I learned early that what little you have can be enough if there's love inside your home. I was the oldest of 4 children, and maybe that's why I learned to carry the weight of silence before I even understood what responsibility meant. My father didn't talk much. He was a hard man, worn by labor. But I remember the few times he smiled when he heard my mother humming while she cooked. It was from him that I learned to use my hands to build and to fix things. He used to say that a man should leave something good behind when he's gone, even if it's just a well-made table or a beautiful memory. Maybe that's why I became a carpenter. I always believed wood could hold stories. Every mark, every cut, every knot, it all carries a piece of time. It was my way of speaking to the world without words. When I turned 17, the Great Depression still haunted the town. I worked at docks, in construction sites, anywhere that would pay enough to keep my parents standing. And when the war came, I watched friends leave and never return. I stayed. I stayed to take care of those I loved. I thought my life would be simple. To work, marry, raise a family, and grow old in peace. And for a while, that's exactly what happened. I met Margaret, my wife, in 1942 at a summer fair. She had a calm smile, the kind that makes life feel lighter. I married her a year later, and when our daughter Clara was born, I thought God had finally rewarded me for all I'd lost. She was her mother's reflection, curious eyes, gentle heart. Life was simple, but complete. I worked all day in my shop and came home covered in sawdust and varnish, greeted by 2 people who made it all worth it. It stayed that way until 1958, when cancer took Margaret. That was the first whole life carved inside me. Even then, Clara made me promise not to give up. She was only 6, but spoke with the strength of someone much older. Mom's in heaven, Daddy. She wants us to keep laughing. I promised, and I kept it. I did my best to be both father and mother. I taught her to measure wood, to draw hearts on the planks, and to count stars on the porch before bed. She laughed so much, and I laughed with her. I truly believed that even without Margaret, life could still be good. But I was wrong, and fate, in its cruel way, would make me understand that love can be the greatest gift and the deepest curse. Life before the tragedy seemed ordinary, but it was all I needed. I woke before sunrise, drank my black coffee, while the radio whispered the morning news, and walked to the small workshop behind the house. The scent of cut wood mixed with the sound of the distant sea reminded me that I was still alive. Clara used to come by before school. She'd sit on a little stool, watching me work with those curious eyes, as if I could create magic with my hands. She used to say every piece of wood had a soul, and my job was to set it free. I laughed, and she laughed too. Sometimes I let her sand small pieces, just so she'd feel part of what I did. Then she'd run off to school, her hair half-tied, her smile lighting up the whole house. On Sundays, we went to church. I sat in the last pew, not because I didn't believe, but because I felt too small before God. Clara sang in the children's choir, and her voice seemed stronger than all the others. People said she carried her own light, and I believed it. It was impossible not to. Our nights were simple, but full of life. We cooked dinner together, and she always insisted on helping cut the vegetables, even when I told her not to. Afterward, we'd sit on the porch, where the wind carried the scent of the sea. I told her stories about when the world was big and slow, and she listened like I was the wisest man alive. Every laugh, every glance, it felt like God had left me a small piece of heaven to care for. But there was something I never told anyone. Sometimes, when the house went quiet, I still talked to Margaret, as if she were there. I told her about Clara, how fast she was growing, how I feared I wasn't enough. Sometimes I believed she heard me. Other times, the silence made me doubt. In 1960, things started to change. The city grew louder. The sound of cars replaced the waves, and people began locking their doors out of fear. I never thought that fear would reach my home. Clara was still a child, but she already understood when I told her not to talk to strangers. I did everything I could to protect her, but the world outside was turning darker. I still remember the last night when everything was fine. Clara slept wearing her new blue dress, the one she loved so much. Before turning off the lights, I looked at her and thought that nothing bad could ever happen to a child so pure. I was wrong. And the next morning, when the sun rose, the world I knew was gone forever. It was a normal spring morning, April 24th, 1961. The sun was rising behind the old neighborhood trees, and the air still smelled of salt and hope. Clara woke up before me, as she always did. She wore her favorite blue dress and tied her hair in 2 uneven braids. She used to say blue was the color of the sky, that if she wore it, God would see her more easily from above. She drank her coffee in a rush, kissed my cheek, and said, "I love you, Daddy. I'll be back before lunch." That was the last time I ever heard her voice. The hours passed normally until the clock struck noon, and Clara didn't return. At first, I thought she might have stayed playing with friends, but when the sun began to fall and the house grew silent, a cold wave ran through my body. Something deep inside told me something was wrong. I walked through the streets calling her name, knocking on doors, asking everyone if they'd seen her. Some said yes, others no. One neighbor mentioned seeing an old green pickup truck parked near the school that morning. Inside, there was a man with rough hands, covered in grease, wearing a worn-out cap. The police were called, but they treated it like just another missing child. They asked useless questions and promised to look into it. I knew they wouldn't. I spent the whole night walking through the streets with a lantern, shouting my daughter's name until my voice broke. 3 days later, a fisherman found her body by the Ashley River, covered in branches and mud. When they called me to identify her, my legs gave out. I remember every detail: the smell of the river, the sound of the wind, the faint sobbing of someone nearby. Nothing felt real. Nothing ever would again. That same day, they arrested a man named Royce Maddox, a former mechanic who worked nearby. He was known around town for fixing cars and getting into trouble. Witnesses claimed they saw him near the school that morning. When I heard his name, my blood froze. I knew him. He had worked for me once, repairing an old cart I used for lumber. During questioning, he denied everything. But what no one knew, what I would only discover later, was that a key piece of evidence disappeared. A torn piece of Clara's blue dress found in his truck was lost in the evidence room. The sheriff called it a mistake. I called it neglect. 2 weeks later, Maddox was released for lack of evidence. I saw him walk out of jail with a cigarette in his mouth and a smug smile, as if he knew he'd beaten the world. The town moved on, but I didn't. That night, I sat on Clara's bed. The room still smelled like soap and crayons. The moonlight fell across her empty pillow. That's when I realized something inside me had died too. From that day on, there was no sun, no laughter, no peace, only the echo of what she used to say every morning. "I love you, Daddy." And in that echo, the man I would become was born. It had been 13 months since the day I lost my daughter. 13 months of learning how to breathe inside silence and live with the sound of absence. People went on with their lives. The world kept spinning. But inside me, time had stopped the moment Clara disappeared. The name Royce Maddox still echoed through Charleston like an open wound. He was free, free to smile, to drink, to work, to exist. And I was the man everyone avoided, the father of the dead girl, the face that reminded Charleston of what it wanted to forget. For a long time, I tried to convince myself that time would bring justice. But time brought nothing, only anger, guilt, and a kind of emptiness that eats at you slowly. I saw Maddox around town, in bars, in stores, carrying himself with the arrogance of a man who fears nothing. Once, he walked past me and gave me a small, smug smile. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. That moment was enough to turn grief into something heavier, darker. On the night of May 12th, 1962, it rained hard in Charleston. The wind rattled the windows and whispered her name. I tried to sleep, but the sound of rain brought too many memories. I sat on the porch for hours, staring into nothing, until I heard the engine of an old truck, a green pickup, the same kind described the day she vanished. I watched its lights fade into the distance, and something inside me decided that was enough. I took my coat, walked into the night, and made my way to the bar where Maddox was said to drink, O'Reilly's Tavern, near the docks. The place was nearly empty, thick with the smell of smoke and whiskey. He was there, sitting in the corner, head low, glass half full, calm, as if he'd never done anything wrong. I walked in, sat at the counter, ordered a coffee. My hands trembled, but my voice didn't. I waited. Then I stood up and approached him. When he looked at me, there was surprise, but no fear. His eyes were cold. He knew who I was. He knew what I'd lost. And still, he just stood there, staring back with that same arrogant smile. I don't remember every word we exchanged. I just remember the anger building inside me, old, heavy, holy in its own way. I remember the rain hitting the door, the bottle slipping from my hand, a shove, shouting, and then silence. When I came to, he was on the floor. The broken glass reflected a face I barely recognized. My own. I felt the metallic taste of guilt mix with the rain dripping from the ceiling. For a moment, I thought about running, but I didn't. I stayed there, staring at the body, staring at the void that he left inside me. When the police arrived, I was still there, standing, drenched, hands dirty, heart shattered. They yelled, shoved me, cuffed me. I didn't resist. I only said, maybe now she can rest. At the station, no one wanted to hear me. To them, I was just another man who lost control, a murderer seeking revenge. And maybe that's what I was. But what they never understood is that sometimes pain doesn't only kill the ones who die, it kills the ones who stay. That night, when they locked me in a cell, I felt something strange. It wasn't fear. It wasn't regret. It was silence. The same silence I heard the day they found my daughter. The same silence I still hear today, as I record these words. The first night in prison was what I imagine hell must feel like. The walls were cold, the floor damp, and the air thick with the echoes of men who never stopped screaming. The smell of rust, sweat, and fear was the same scent I'd felt the day they found my daughter's body. In there, time didn't move. The hours were long, but the silence was longer. In the days that followed, the interrogations began. They wanted me to say I'd planned it, that I left my house intending to kill. I told them the truth, that I had no weapon, that I didn't know what I was going to do, that I only wanted to look him in the eye. But the truth was never enough for them. They called me a murderer, a vigilante, a madman. Every word that came from the prosecutor's mouth was another nail driven into the coffin of my dignity. They didn't want to understand what brought me there. They just wanted someone to blame, someone to hold up to the town and say, see, justice still works. I was the perfect face for it, the broken man, the desperate father who crossed the line. During the trial, I looked at the people in the courtroom. Familiar faces, neighbors, men who once shared drinks with me, women who used to smile at Clara. None of them looked back. The papers called me the Butcher of Charleston. See, they wrote about me like I was an animal, a monster hiding behind tired eyes. My lawyer was young, inexperienced. He tried to defend me, but his words fell flat between laughter and whispers of contempt. When the prosecutor raised his voice and said, "This man didn't kill out of pain. He killed out of pride," the crowd applauded. I looked at the judge and understood the verdict had been written long before the first day of court. The evidence was twisted. The report on the broken bottle vanished. Witnesses who could have confirmed that Maddox came at me first were never called. One officer even said I was smiling when they arrested me, a lie printed in every paper and broadcast across the radio. Smiling? If they'd looked into my eyes, they would have seen the emptiness. On the 10th day, the jury returned. When the judge read the sentence, everything went distant, like I wasn't even there. Guilty of premeditated murder. Sentence, death by electric chair. Those were the words. No one stood. No one objected. The town had its show, and I became its villain. As they led me out, a reporter shouted, "Do you have anything to say?" I answered, "You think justice won tonight, but justice died long before that night." He didn't understand. None of them did. Down the hall, one of the guards shoved me and whispered, "You got what you deserved." I didn't react. I just looked ahead, feeling the cold metal on my wrists, thinking maybe he was right. Not for the crime I committed, but for believing truth was ever enough. After the trial, what was left of my family scattered like dust, carried by the wind. My brothers, who once visited me on Sundays, stopped coming. Some out of fear, others out of shame. The truth is, no one wants to be reminded that blood can also fail. My mother was long gone, and my father, old and sick, died a few months after the sentencing. They said his heart gave out. I think it was shame that killed him. The newspapers made me the perfect monster. Every edition carried my photo. Empty eyes, face aged beyond its years. They printed stories that never happened, invented words I never said. They wrote that I laughed, that I was proud of what I'd done. They said I planned it, waited for the right moment. The town believed it. It's easier to believe in guilt than to face injustice. I received few letters. Some were from strangers, people who claimed to understand me. Others were filled with hate, with words that burned deeper than any sentence. One of them said, "You took from another man his right to redemption." I tore it apart, but I never forgot it. The letter that hurt the most came from my wife's sister, Eleanor. She wrote that she couldn't visit anymore, that her children were afraid to hear my name. She said that even though she knew I loved Clara, she couldn't defend a killer. I read those words and felt like I was losing my daughter all over again. Time in prison has a cruel way of reminding you of what you've lost. Sometimes I heard other inmates laughing with their visitors, sons calling their fathers, mothers holding their boys. I only had the sound of my own memories, and they were merciless. I remember one afternoon, in 1968 when I got an unexpected visit. It was the pastor from the church Clara used to attend. He held a Bible in his hands and carried the look of a man who didn't know what to say. He sat in silence for a while, then said, "Thomas, forgiveness isn't for those who hurt you. It's for you." I stayed quiet. He waited, but I didn't answer. Because forgiveness, to me, is a luxury, one the dead don't ask for, and the living don't deserve. After that day, I never had another visit. Only guards, lawyers, and the echo of my own thoughts. Sometimes I thought about Margaret, wondered what she would say if she were here. Maybe she'd tell me to pray, to have faith. But I haven't known how to pray since the day I lost Clara. Faith died with her. Of all the pains, the one that hurts the most is being forgotten, because dying is easy. Being forgotten while you're still breathing, that's what truly kills you. The years that followed were an eternity. Time stopped being counted in days and became measured in screams, footsteps, and clanging steel. Death row is a place where even the air feels guilty. Every soul in there carries a story no one wants to hear anymore. I was just another number, a forgotten man, condemned to wait for his own end. At first, I tried to keep to myself. I thought if I stayed quiet, maybe no one would notice me. I was wrong. Silence is an invitation to cruelty. The guards looked at me with disgust. Some called me the devil's father. Others spat on the floor when they passed. One of them, Reynolds, used to ask every morning, "Good day to die, Hale?" and laugh like it was the funniest thing in the world. One night, a new inmate arrived in the cell next to mine. His name was Earl Donovan, a big man with eyes full of hatred. He'd read about me in the papers and decided I deserved to die before the chair did its job. He said he couldn't stand barroom killers. For weeks, he tormented me, throwing spoiled food into my cell, banging on the bars, shouting my daughter's name to drive me mad. One day, during group showers, he attacked me. It was quick. I felt the blow to my ribs before I even saw his face. He threw me to the ground and tried to strangle me with a rolled-up towel. He failed only because another inmate screamed for help. I spent a week in the prison hospital with a bruised lung and 3 broken ribs. I'll never forget what he whispered before they dragged him away. "You should have died instead of her." After that day, I learned to sleep with my back to the wall. I learned not to trust anyone. Death row is a graveyard for the living, and every night is a fight to stay breathing. Some go mad, others give up. I just survived. As the years went by, the humiliation began. They cut my food, poured cold water on me as I slept, kept me locked in for days. One winter morning, they woke us all at 5 just to make us kneel and scrub the corridor floor. A guard walked by and said, "You'll die on your knees, Hale. Get used to it." I didn't answer. I just kept cleaning. I saw men lose their minds in there. One sliced open his own arm just to feel something different from boredom. Another begged for the chair, saying he preferred that to the silence. And every time a cell went empty, the sound of the guard's footsteps dragging a body reminded me. The line was moving. One day, it would be my turn. Even then, I didn't cry. Not after the first years. Tears dry up when you realize no one's listening. I learned to talk to myself. Sometimes I talk to Clara. I told her I was fine, even when I wasn't. Told her that Daddy still remembered the blue dress, the laughter, the stars we used to count on the porch. And deep down, I think it was her that kept me alive. I spent over a decade staring at the same walls, hearing the same voices, breathing the same rotten air. But nothing inside that prison was worse than the memory of the day I lost her. That was the real death row, the one I'd been walking since 1961. The last night is always quieter than the rest. Even those who pretend to be brave feel the weight of the end when the lights go out. In here, death doesn't come suddenly. It warns you. It walks slowly through the corridors, dragging time behind it. Since this morning, I've felt its presence. It's in the air, in the bars, in the stairs. Everyone knows when it's their turn. They told me that tomorrow, at 6 a.m., the lights will come on early. The priest will arrive. The guards will change uniforms. And the room at the end of the hallway, locked for years, will open for me. The chair, they say it's been polished, shining, as if that made it less cruel. I spent the day trying to sleep, but sleep didn't come. I heard guards walking back and forth, low voices, whispers, like they were discussing a show. Some inmates shouted my name, others made jokes. In here, another man's death is the only entertainment left. They asked me to choose my last meal. I refused. Hunger doesn't belong in farewells. I asked only for a glass of water and this tape. I told the warden I wanted to record my last words. He hesitated, but eventually agreed. Maybe he wanted to see how far a man's pain could go. Now it's night, and the corridor is still. The wind slips through the cracks, cold and wet. I can smell rain in the air, just like that night. Funny how life insists on repeating its darkest days. I look at my hands and barely recognize them. Weak, trembling, scarred by time and chains. These same hands once held my daughter, carved wood, built things. And tomorrow, they'll be tied until nothing's left of them. Some say fear comes at the end, but fear doesn't visit me anymore. What comes now is something else, a strange peace, mixed with regret and longing, a peace that hurts. I've spent years wondering if what I did was justice or sin. The answer changes every time I think of Clara. When I remember her smiling, it feels like justice. When I remember her crying, it feels like sin. A new guard passed by earlier. He dropped off coffee for his shift and stared at me for a few seconds. I think he expected me to say something, but I had no words left to waste. The only ones that matter are here, on this tape. Not for me, but for anyone who might one day want to know what really happened. In a few hours, they'll take me from this cell. They'll tell me to kneel, strap my wrists, cover my eyes. And when they turn on the current, I want to think of Clara, running through the fields, blue dress flowing in the wind, her laughter crossing time, reaching me one last time. The body dies only once, but memory, it dies every day. And tonight, for the last time, I'll let her go. If you're hearing this tape, it means you wanted the truth. Not the one written in the papers, not the one shouted in court, but the truth that's been locked inside me all these years. And now, before they flip the switch, I'm going to tell it. That night, I didn't leave home to kill anyone. I left because silence had become louder than my faith. I couldn't sleep anymore. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my daughter's face calling to me from the dark. I grabbed my coat, walked aimlessly, and ended up at the bar where they said Royce Maddox drank every night. He was there, sitting in the corner, glass of whiskey in hand, that same green truck parked outside. When he saw me, he didn't look away. He smiled, slow, twisted. The kind of smile the devil would give if he knew how easy it is to break a man's soul. I walked up to him and said, "You killed my daughter." He set his glass down, gave a dry laugh, and said, "You shouldn't have left her alone. Father of the Year." The room went silent. No one moved. He looked me over, enjoying every second, then added, "She cried, you know? Cried until her voice broke. And when it was over, I threw that little blue dress in the river. Pretty thing, wasn't she?" Those were his words, cold, calculated, as if he were telling a joke. And then he laughed, that low, filthy laugh that still echoes in my head. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I just heard the sound of glass breaking, the thud of his body hitting the floor, the rain mixing with his blood. When I came to, I was on my knees, crying, not out of anger, but from a kind of pain that doesn't have a name. At the trial, I didn't tell any of this. No one would have believed me. They said I was making up stories to excuse hatred. But the truth is, he confessed. He confessed to me, looking me in the eye, mocking what was left of my heart. And now, as I wait for the clock to strike its final hour, I want this on record. I didn't kill a man. I ended a nightmare. I silenced the hell that justice refused to see. They can call me a murderer. They can call me a monster. I accept it. But if anyone ever listens to this tape, I hope they understand that everything I did out of love. If there is a God listening, I want him to know I never asked for revenge. I asked for peace. And maybe, when the current runs through me, I'll finally find it. In my daughter's arms. My name is Thomas Hale. I was a carpenter, a husband, a father. I lived with faith. I died with guilt. And everything I did out of love. And these were my last words.
Thomas Hale's tape was found in 1987, 25 years after his execution, during renovations at the old Columbia State Prison in South Carolina. It was hidden behind a hollow wall, inside a small wooden box engraved with the words, "For those who still believe in the truth." The discovery shocked the nation. The audio, preserved despite years of humidity and dust, revealed every word Thomas spoke on his final night. His trembling voice, the slow breaths, the long pauses, each second weighed between pain and forgiveness. Days after the tape became public, a retired police officer came forward. His name was Edward Blanchard, and he had worked on the Clara Hale case in 1961. In his statement, he confirmed what Thomas had always said. Key evidence from the crime had been intentionally hidden. The piece of Clara's blue dress found in Royce Maddox's car had been collected, but never logged. Blanchard revealed that the police chief at the time, Charles Whitford, ordered it destroyed to protect a family friend of the Maddoxes. That revelation was enough to reopen the case in 1988. The new investigation uncovered the record of the anonymous phone call Thomas mentioned, confirming it was real. Further evidence showed that Maddox had been accused of similar assaults in 2 other towns, both cases quietly dismissed for lack of evidence. It was too late. Thomas Hale had been dead for over 2 decades. The truth arrived when his body was already dust. But the tape still spoke. Radio stations and documentaries replayed his final minutes, and for the first time, people heard the voice of a man who never begged for mercy, only for justice. His words echoed across America, reigniting debates about death row and how many innocent men had died without ever being heard. Today, the name Thomas Hale is no longer remembered as the Butcher of Charleston, but as a man who died telling the truth, whose voice, captured on a rusted tape, proved stronger than death itself. The cell where he spent his last days remains empty. On one brick wall, written in faded charcoal, there are 7 words: "The truth never dies. It just waits." These were the last words of Thomas Hale.